Welcome, everyone, to this digital security event. Why organizations need digital security more than ever. This event is organized by four organizations: CSM Stan, TechSoup, WAPSI, and Macaya. And our aim with this event is that we want to share with you some of the results and findings of some research we developed that actually tell us what is important digital security for civil society organizations around the world and which are the main needs they need to tackle in order to face this reality. But we also want to create awareness in civil society organizations, in private sector, and founders about the relevance of this topic nowadays. For starting this conversation, I would like to invite you to answer a question that appears in the bottom of your screens. Please interact with this event and answer the question. Okay, so we have some questions. Let's wait for other interactions from the audience. It's great. Everybody is participating. We have more people in the room. In the meantime, for the people who would like to join this event in Spanish, please push the button on the top of your screens, the translation button. Para las personas que quieran ver este evento en español, pueden presionar el botón de traducción que aparece en la parte superior de sus pantallas. Okay, so now we have like some answers from the audience, and congratulations for the people who answered the option B. That's the correct answer. I mean, when we talk about digital security, we need to talk about information security. We also need to talk about the IT or the technology security and the cyber security. And this is something that will give us a template or a broadband for this conversation that we are having today. So for continuing with the event, I would like to invite you to watch a video of civil society organizations' experiences around the world with this topic, with digital security. Let's see the video to introduce this conversation.
Hello, my name is Christian Elongue. I'm the Executive Director of Munakalati.
Hola, mi nombre es Arsica Pérez, soy la coordinadora de comunicaciones y mercadeo de la Fundación Acarpín.
There are so many challenges in Africa concerning digital security. The number one fact is the fact that we don't have enough experts. There are very few people who are thoroughly trained and who are professional in digital security and cyber crime. Most of the people who are in the industry who claim to be cyber experts are not really trained. They are just people who have interest or enthusiasts. But the second thing is that we don't have enough funding or access to resources on digital security faced by CSO in Africa. The third element is the fact that awareness is not strong. And many organizations, especially in the NGO sector, because of financial constraint, are using outdated software, or they are using pirated, software that are not original copy, and because of that they are exposed to cyber attack.
El tipo de riesgos digitales está el malware, el phishing, que generalmente pues todos somos muy vulnerables ante estos ataques cibernéticos. Esos han sido los más grandes, especialmente el malware y yo. La historia fue que resulta que cuando uno le salen todos esos anuncios en el computador, no nos dimos cuenta, le dimos sí a una apertura de una de esas ventanas, cuando le dimos sí, le generamos el acceso al ataque cibernético y lo que hizo el delincuente fue secuestrar toda la información. Entonces el malware es eso, te cogen y te hackean, te roban absolutamente toda la información y después te dicen que para poder devolver esa información tienes que pagar un valor, pero eso no te exonera de que sí te la van a devolver. Vos puedes pagar, pero probablemente no te devuelvan la información, sino que te den una parte y la otra la secuestren. Además, es muy importante que siempre denunciemos ante la fiscalía y ante las entidades competentes. Nosotros no sabíamos eso, no lo hicimos, y hoy por eso les digo a todas ustedes, organizaciones sociales, tenemos que saber del tema. El tema de ciberseguridad es importante, no podemos seguir pecando por inocentes.
What recommendation do we have to encourage cybersecurity within organization? Number one, conduct regular phishing simulation tests. Aside doing those fake tests on a regular basis, it's also important to always maintain awareness. So what I do personally as the leader of the organization is that whenever I see an attack or a news line about an organization that has been victim of a cyber attack, I'm going to use it as an opportunity to sensitize the team about it. And the last thing is regularly teach them about those things. So one thing I did, I remember early this year in June, was I asked each staff member to basically share what are the 5 tips that he can use to be digitally secure. And if you have a team of 10 or 11, when each one of them are sharing, well, you are realizing that there is a collective intelligence that is going to be generated, and them doing the research themselves increase their own understanding and awareness, and it's ultimately going to change their behavior and attitude. So that's basically what we at the level of Unacademy we are experiencing.
Primero que todas tenemos que hacer es no creer que somos invisibles ante los ataques cibernéticos. Pues si algo tan grande como el Ministerio de Salud se vio atacado, estoy segura que nosotros como instituciones y todos nos podemos ver atacados a nivel personal y a nivel empresarial.
Number one, increase awareness. This event is contributing towards that. Number two, increase access to training and resources. Number three, support research, on cybersecurity so that it's possible to know what's happening.
La verdad es que para las organizaciones sin ánimo de lucro es casi que imposible continuar con estas funciones de vernos involucrados en ataques cibernéticos. Entonces, por eso necesitamos que más empresas, no solamente Hilton Foundation, nos ayude, sino que otras organizaciones se pongan la mano en el corazón y nos ayuden, porque realmente somos absolutamente todas las organizaciones sin ánimo de lucro que estamos desinformadas sobre ese tema, y qué tan bueno que no solamente sea una organización, sino muchas que nos brinden la oportunidad de poder seguir instruyéndonos, aprendiendo y dándoles un potencial para ser menos vulnerables ante los ataques cibernéticos. Por eso necesitamos que empresas y personas como tú hoy se vinculen con nosotros. Gracias.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I wish you all the best to all the CSO. Bye.
Well, experiences are great. And I think that experiences are really relevant for learning because we know that there is no like a strange concept. And actually, we had the opportunity to see how this is happening in our sector, and it's happening to civil society organizations or organizations like the ones that we are working on. So let's go deep into this topic. And for talking about this topic, we're going to have a conversation that have like 3 moments. The first phase of this conversation, we are going to share with you the results of 2 researchers that were developed in Africa and in Latin America. The second phase will be an analysis about these findings and the digital security concept. And the third phase will be focused on some conclusions and a call to action. So for starting with the first phase of this conversation, I would like to invite and to welcome to Kwame Asante and Catalina Restrepo. Kwame Asante is Marketing and IT Support Officer at Waxi. Kwame is an experienced and high-skilled IT consultant with over 7 years industry expertise working across the private and civil society sectors. And Catalina Restrepo is Corporate Solutions Director for Macaya, expert in education with more than 10 years of experience working with the most vulnerable communities, and convinced that education is the only way to close the inequality gap. So welcome to Kwame and Catalina. And please, Kwame and Catalina, tell us from the research you did, give us some context about digital security issues and problems. Which are the main findings you found in that research and also the patterns in our sector, in the civil society sector? We can start with you, Kwame. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Carlos. It's always a delight to meet with like minds to discuss about what is happening around technology globally. Like you said, I represent the West Africa Civil Society Institute, and I'm speaking to you from Ghana. And I will want to take us through a finding on a research that we conducted within our region.
Now we see the screen.
Okay, great. So our research is a very timely one and a very important study. And I would say that it's an indispensable asset for all individuals and groups committed to advancing digital security the world over, but particularly in our West African context. This research was founded by the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. So all kudos to them. You would agree with me that there has been a global surge in the adoption of technology, and individuals and organizations have been compelled to embrace digital tools and platforms for a wide range of tasks. However, this increased reliance on technology also brings about evolving security risks along the lines. Particularly within our region, there has also been a general trend or concern of government clamping down on digital citizens and the digital civic space, targeting civil society actors and activists through social media and other digital means. This they do through social media bans, sponsored attacks, internet shutdowns, restrictions, especially through surveillance, intimidations, physical threats or attacks, and then during periods like elections. So we carried this particular research as part of our efforts to bridge the knowledge gap regarding digital security risk and exposure and possible factors and considerations on how to assess the level of preparedness and possible response at an organizational level, and then looking at the political space. One of our key highlights of our study was that a third of the surveyed organizations have experienced a digital security attack within the last 12 months. And then half of that number have experienced cybersecurity attacks that pertain to computer virus attacks. Aside computer virus attacks, there has also been threats and attacks from social media, threats and attacks from emails, physical threats and attacks, SMS, voicemails, and a host of others. Now, in terms of frequency, still looking at virus attacks, malicious code topped the list. And by malicious code, we are looking at malware. So in addition to viruses, we have Trojans, worms, and other software that is created to cause harm to computers. And of course, software failure followed closely. And then we had hardware failure, personnel loss, and then the list was ended with espionage. From an organizational standpoint, our survey also sought to analyze the variations in digital security incidents across organization types and in its entirety, we can see that both local NGOs and community-based organizations are more than twice as exposed to digital security threats as international INGOs. So from this, a fair assumption to make here is that international NGOs could be more resourced and capacitated in handling digital security incidents. Some general patterns recorded highlights on high usage of emails accessed on desktops and mobile devices. So there's a huge digital adoption or technology adoption in our region, and almost all the organizations we surveyed are using emails via their phones and their computers. Majority of these organizations are also worried about the safety of their information when they use these digital platforms. But regardless of the concern they have and the worry they have, only 12% of them have actually allocated a budget for information security in their organization, which I'm sure could be attributed to several factors. One domain that revealed significant deficiencies in organizational capabilities was their readiness to respond to digital security threats and attacks. So you can see that almost half of the respondents do not know of any method they can use to protect their digital tools and activities. And then two-thirds of them do not know what to do in case they suffer a digital security incident. And close to that same number never participated in any digital security training or course in their entire lifetime. Now, for the small fraction that have some knowledge in digital security, it is interesting to know that their skills are actually self-taught. So they learned these skills on their own. And whilst a high majority have perceived some guidance, it's also sad to identify that this is where digital security preparedness ends. So they only acquire the skills they need on their own, and then it ends there. They do not carry it forward. Now, some topical issues that were mentioned in this survey were on data, security, and then protection. These are the areas that organizations would want to acquire more knowledge and skills on. Now, delving into policies and regulations surrounding digital security, almost half of the respondents were not aware of any national laws and regulations surrounding digital security in their countries. And then two-thirds of them were not registered with any data protection agency in their country. And out of the pool of countries we did our research in, which is about 18, only 7 of them have a comprehensive digital security framework in place. Now, most of the countries in the region do not have clear legislation to address cybercrime or other digital security incidents. And where there is any legal provision, it stands a chance at posing risks to privacy and freedom. And even with existence of internationally accepted frameworks like the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, AU's Convention on Cybersecurity, and ECOWAS guidelines, you would still realize that there is slow harmonization of the countries with these international and global frameworks that exist. Now, at the level of organizations, there is the need to put in more effort looking at the results we have now. Almost a third of respondents have no ICT policy in place, and they are also using their personal devices for official work. Majority of them agree that much effort and attention should be given to digital security in their organizations. Now, to conclude on our survey, there are some key elements that I want to highlight on. So it is clear that there is high prevalence of digital security threats and attacks. There is also virus attacks, social media attacks, and email attacks as the most commonest of all attacks that we were able to outline. Community-based organizations and local NGOs experience the highest rates of attacks compared to international NGOs. Majority of civil society organizations lack proper knowledge and training to protect themselves. And there is also a huge gap in preparedness towards responding to digital security attacks. There is also inadequate laws and policies surrounding digital security attacks across the countries, and only a handful of society organizations actually have IT policies and digital security policies. But then there is a high level of interest with regards to acquiring the skills that are needed for organizations to be resilient. But unfortunately, there is lack of financial resources, inadequate ICT infrastructure, low digital security awareness and skills among civil society organizations. Thank you very much, Carlos. Over.
Thank you, Kwame. Thank you for sharing with us these findings and trends. And completely agree with you. I mean, with the conclusions. And yeah, if I will summarize that in a phrase, I will say that what you are seeing in the organizations in your region is they have lack of policies and procedures in the organizations, lack of training. They don't know what to do when they face an incident, a risk incident, and of course there's a lack of budget for acquiring the right tools and providing the right training for addressing this topic. But definitely it's a really important topic because, as you mentioned, the threat is dead, and we are facing the threat in some cases more than other kind of organizations. So thank you for sharing these findings, Kwame. And let's invite Catalina Restrepo, so we can say the findings in Latin America and the Caribbean. Hi, Catalina. Welcome.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Kwame, for your research. I think Latam and the Caribbean is not far from you. Like we have some similar data that we find. So I'm going to share with you all the research and the most important information to have it on the top of the table. So I'm gonna, good. The object that we have for the research was to identify realities and needs from the social organizations in Latam and in the Caribbean for develop learning content and methodologies to help them to improve in digital security strategies. Because as Africa said, they don't have many info, they don't know how to do it, they don't have budget. And in Latin America, it's quite similar. The way we organize the info was based in our pillars in digital transformation strategy. So you're going to see information under vision, under organizational culture, under operation and infrastructure. Because this way we organize information help us to understand how we can help CSOs to move forward in these topics. So when I'm going to be talking about vision, I'm going to be talking about the strategic they have to create to face the digital transformation that they need to be prepared and safe for this topic. In organizational culture, it's all about the teams and people that work in the organizations and how we can change mindset and create innovation strategies to help them to be secure. In operations, it's all about agile process to harness technology, and infrastructure. In infrastructure is about protecting of data, devices, and systems. So what we got after having conversation with experts, doing some surveys, doing some focus group and conversation with different organizations, this is what we have. In the blue lines I want to share these because in the blue lines, we ask CSOs what do they understand about vision, and these are two phrases that they mention a lot, and I have another two in the next slide. But I want to share. They said like for them, vision is action strategies for digital security system and to design a work plan. They are close to what it is, but when we ask them if they have this kind of information, this is what we find. 51%, almost 52% have not identified their risks, and this is because they don't have a team or they don't know how to do it or they don't understand what is a risk. And 33% have managed risk based on the information available in their organizations, but it's a low amount of people or amount of organizations that can do that. And 32% have prioritized risk because they have been exposed to them. So this is very sad because what we saw in research is like they are only reacting after the attack. So it's better if they be prepared, if they have some trainings and so on. The other two phrases that they said about vision was like is expert advice and also effective allocated on resources. Of course, that is very important because under the strategical vision, it's important to have a budget with a proposal with goals to get the digital transformation in the organization. And we have here the 16% have hired an expert to solve the problem is a low number. And this happens because, of course, having an expert is expensive for them. So not all organizations have the opportunity to have an expert, like saying, or helping them after or helping them to be prepared of this. And almost 15% didn't take any action to manage risk. And that happens because, as the person in the video said, they don't know how to face attacks. Like when they are in the problem now, they have like they start reading or asking to experts or asking for help, but sometimes it's too late. And 12% allocate a monthly budget to purchase software and hardware, and this connects with Africa's conclusion because normally budgets for digital security is not big in organizations because, of course, CSOs have a different, they prioritize different things. Under pillar number two, that is organizational culture, we have these two phrases that they mention a lot. They understood a cultural organization as the importance of information safekeeping and information management habits. I have another two in the next slide. And in these, like like the summary for these numbers is like they don't have strategies, they don't have trains, they don't have, they haven't created a way of having trainings for their teams. Here, the big number is the 63% that they don't provide training or refresh courses for their employees, so employers are alone in this. They 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 react with the information that they have as a general knowledge, but not as the official knowledge that they have to have because of the strategy that each NGO has to face this kind of situation. The other three things that they mention are like measure to promote good practice, how to identify risk, that is very important, and personal security. Um, Here, I want to highlight the last number that we got. That is like the 16% promote navigation and security network. And I want to put it because it's not enough to promote navigation in security networks. I think it's important to understand what is a security network. If they will have an IT team, they can block those webs that are not safe enough, or they can suggest, or they can create a strategy not to promote it, but have like a whole strategy under this activity that is one of the options that you have to be attacked. And the 25% that is here, sending educational information and invite to refresh courses and digital security, also is common, as Africa said, and as I was saying before. In pillar number 3, that is this operational pillar, they understood the pillar as a process for safeguarding information and the way of knowing what to do, how to act, what to apply in the organization. And 20% have softwares and operational system license. And here that number is, I want to highlight because we have this opportunity with TechSoup, we have to keep inviting organizations to have security license, official license, to like not to be with licenses that are free or are not enough secure to prevent digital security issues. The other number that we want to highlight here is the 40%, the personalization of emails in which identity is in person and under authorized disclosure information. Um, and in the fourth pillar that we have, that is infrastructure, they understood it as antivirus license, storage, control access, safekeeping, protection, free safe use. And I want to highlight this free software use because that is example of what some organizations have the wrong information, because having free software is not necessarily safe enough. And here, 65% control access to information and sensitive data by employees. 16% do not take any action to guarantee data confidence and availability. And 11% use cloud storage to avoid exposure of information. That is a low amount because only 11% having these TechSoup options is of course, because they don't have the information, they understand how to use it, or maybe they don't know how to use it because moving all the people to cloud strategies is necessary to have a mindset, a changing mindset to move all the team to work in the cloud. So there are more efforts to keep going to have a security strategy in organizations. Based in this focus group that we have, we want to share those needs that most of them tell us here. So they said that they need to allocate budget for digital security management. We keep hearing the same, budget. To train for strength knowledge and overcoming fears, implementing this literary program according to the different stages of life, to have a trained human talent to lead process with organizations, to map tools to safeguard sensitive data and confidential information, to develop protocols, guidelines, and procedures to respond to and mitigate threats and risk situations, to identify courses and tools available for employees. So what CSO's dreams is to have this. And with the experts, I also want to share these 3 highlights because I think they're very important and they are close of what we also need. And they said that it seems necessary to approach digital security as a habit, as a cross-cultural element of the organization culture. So it's a must. Like as we train people in leadership, in team building, in technical things, in digital security also, we need to train them. And it has to be part of the culture because this happens every day. They also said that it's people who can make informed decisions about risk, prevent, and mitigate things. And this is also connected with the training because when I have the information and when I have the critical thinking to say, okay, stop, this might be a risk, so I can stop and don't click on what I have to click. And the last one is, it is essential to move toward a proactive culture. Generally, there is a response after the attack rather than before it occurs. So as I said, CSOs, not only CSOs, but also big companies are reacting after the attacks and it's necessary to be prevented. And in general conclusions, I'm going to finish the presentation by pillars, and at the end, I'm going to give you general conclusions. In vision, of course, the big conclusion is about budget, like they need to allocate budget to face the situation. And the other here big conclusion is the lack of digital security policies, procedures, and routes, because they don't know how to create it and how to build these politics and procedures. Under organizational culture is lack of knowledge, as we said. Low percent of employees are aware, they don't understand and they are not aware about this important topic. And of course, the importance of training all the people to be prepared. Under operations, actions are taken to ensure confidential and availability of data and information, but access is limited. And risks such as phishing, loss, and disclosure of information and infiltration to corporate system and identified. And under infrastructure, there are licensed softwares and operating systems, but the organizations are not getting into them, and the low use of cloud storage solutions that prevent exposed to virus and any digital attack that faces. And as the big conclusions are like transform social in this mindset that is is very expensive, and maybe it's very expensive, but if they start like with small steps and with small strategies and with small trainings, they can start preparing the team to face the digital security issues. Generate, generate transversal learning process, of course, as I've been saying during all the presentations, to raise awareness among employees, because as the video says, they think it's not for us, it's maybe for very important companies or the political people. So we have to make them be like prepared and aware. And to know the organization's capability needs assets to be protected and technological tools necessary to manage digital security. And as a huge conclusion, because we did this research with CSM stands, we create after the research a training strategy with it has 4 different models, and we're very happy to have it, but we need to move to the other step is to put it in a digital platform where everybody can use it, because as you see, the 4 difficult topics are very interesting, are very necessary, and help them organizations to start like the first steps to work digital security strategy. So this is what we have from LATAM and the Caribbean, and thank you, Carlos, for this space.
Thank you, Catalina, for sharing these findings, and thank you, Kwame, again. For the people who join a little bit late and want to listen this event in Spanish, you can push the translation button that is in the top of your screens. Las personas que ingresaron un poco después al evento y quieren escuchar este evento en español, pueden presionar el botón de traducción que aparece en la parte superior de sus pantallas. So thank you again, Catalina and Kwame, and thank you for the 180 people who are paying attention to this event. Definitely, the results are quite similar in terms of the needs that civil society organizations in Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean have in terms of digital security. But I would like to highlight two things. One is that although digital security is not in the core of what our organizations do, it is needed, and mainly in this era where we are completely exposed to technology and that we are interacting a lot with technology. And the second thing is about the culture that you mentioned, Catalina, and Kwame as well mentioned. When we talk about training the people inside organizations, and we talk about procedures, policies, and what to do when I have an attack, we're talking about to prepare the culture of the organization so we can develop best practices inside the organization, and we know how to tackle this kind of issues or these kind of problems. So I would like to invite the audience to answer a question that is in the bottom of the screens. And the question is, which of these data called your attention the most? So please interact with this event and tell us what is the most important for you from the perspective of this research. The question will appear in the bottom of your computer of your screens. And again, it is which of these data and these results call your attention the most. In the meantime, I know that some of you have a lot of questions about how to get access to licenses and to resources. And one person from the team in the chat is going to answer all these questions. Actually, is answering them right now. Okay, so we are seeing some answers. Top 5 most used and most received vulnerabilities, lack of knowledge about the relevance of digital security. The NGOs are not using available security measures, low use of cloud storage for civil society organizations. And this is great. I mean, this about the cloud, because when we saw the results about the pillar, about the infrastructure pillar, we found that many organizations have access to IT devices, and some of them have access to licenses, but many of them do not use the cloud for storage the information. Marketing, making a digital security culture is also important. Lack of security policies, lack of investment in infrastructure. How relevant is the digital security for organizations? Well, a lot of comments about what called your attention regarding these research fundings. You will find we will share this presentation, and also the videos will be uploaded in a platform that you can have access to in the video of this webinar as well. So you can recall all the information we are having here. So to go deep in this conversation and go to the analysis about the situation, let me invite please to Marnie Webb, Rachel Huguet, and Chris Worman. Marnie, okay, you're loading. So Marnie is Chief Community Officer, Impact Officer at TechSoup and CEO of Caravan Studios. In her role, she works with communities around the world to describe desired impact and to develop technology solutions to help them to move forward towards the impact. And Rachel, who is also loved, Rachel and Chris, yeah, hi. So Rachel is Partnerships Officer at Conrad N. Hilton Foundation. She manages the strategy development and implementation of 3 cross-cutting grant-making portfolios. And Chris is co-founder, Chief Partnership and Strategy Officer at Connect Humanity, an organization dedicated to linking communities with the blends of knowledge and resources they need to achieve digital equity. So welcome all of you. And for go deep into this conversation, I would like to start talking about some relevant topics regarding digital security. And I would like to start, Marnie, with you. How does trust and safety play a critical role in talking about digital security, and why is that essential for individuals and civil society organizations? And actually, what's the relationship with this concept that we are framing today?
Yeah. Increasingly, I've been thinking about the concept of trust and safety, which is about how we interact with one another on the internet, the rules that guide those interactions, both in terms of community mores, right, but also the ability to report harm to platform owners, whether those platform owners are Facebook or X, formerly Twitter, or Google or Microsoft or whomever they be, and the government's ability to protect you on there. It's made up of a bunch of different parts, right? There is the part of our ability to act safely on the internet and interact with information and others is our ability to have secure systems, what we were just hearing the presentations about. It's also about our ability to have digital equity. Do we have electricity? Do we have high-speed internet? Do we have devices? Do we have the training to be able to use those devices? And then it is also about our ability to determine the veracity of the information with which we're interacting, right? And this both impacts phishing attempts. Is that email really who it says sent it, right? So that I can interact with it. But also it's about mis and disinformation and the way in which we spread it. And these things are separate, right? Like trust and safety is not the same thing as digital equity and not the same thing as cybersecurity. But I think it's very hard to talk about only one of them because we have to strengthen our resources in all of those areas to be able to be more resilient as a sector.
I see, Marnie, and completely agree with you that it's difficult to separate all these concepts. Mainly, I mean, and I would like to bring to the conversation, building up on your point, that the findings show us that the majority of digital security risks or threats happened because of the use that people inside organizations, the use of technology that people inside of the organization actually do. So if we are talking about that, it is important to refresh that concept about digital equity, where we talk about the access to technology, but also the ability to use that technology for their own purposes, but and also for the world purposes. So definitely are concepts that are linked one to another, and that we have to take into account. So I would like to continue the conversation with you, Chris. For you, from your perspective, which are the main challenges and opportunities that organizations face in terms of digital equity?
Thanks. So, as Marnie and several folks have noted on this call, there are a lot of challenges with training. So the definition of digital equity is a time when everyone has the access to the internet, and I would say high-speed, affordable internet, the tools and skills to use it. That's the definition. I would take that a little bit further to some of the trust and safety points. The access, tools, and skills to use it within a policy and regulatory environment that makes using the internet safe, or at least as safe as not using the internet. So I think the basic idea of digital equity is just that people can fully participate in a digital economy on their terms, preferably. The challenges to that, as I think any of you in the audience can understand, are enormous. Half of the world is not online. Many organizations struggle to afford not only new devices, but then the training and the capacity to keep up with security and other issues as digital issues, digital challenges evolve. We did a piece of work earlier this year with well, actually last year, with all of the TechSoup global network partners, Civicus, a bunch of other wings, a bunch of other kind of global networks supported by Hilton and others. Mike, I know you're helping in the chat. You might put a link to the data dashboard looking at the challenges that civil society and those that civil society serves face when it comes to digital equity. And we broke it out across those pillars: access to the internet, tools, training, and the policy environment. And if you go through and explore that, many of you won't be surprised based on your personal experience. I think what I would suggest as sort of main challenges in that are not just that people struggle to access the internet, the tools, the trainings, But the real issue right now that civil society reports that the internet is increasingly critical to their work. It's critical to communicating with their donors. It's critical to communicating with their partners. It's critical to the work that they do with communities. And yet, um, that access is not always safe. And many of the people that civil society serves just don't have it. So, if we look at these challenges to digital equity, they are multiple and compounded by both the fact that the world is getting more complex, that the needs are getting greater online, and we just have a very, very long way to go to get to the point where we can even worry about digital security for some communities because they're nowhere close to getting online. So a lot to unpack in the conversation, but we can talk about the good news later, I suppose.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris, for amplifying the concept. And I would like to highlight two things you just mentioned that I think are really important to remember. One is today is critical for our work as civil society organizations to use technology, to use internet, but we need to use it in a safe environment. So for that we need digital security. We need to work on that, and that safeness is not only at the level organization, at the level of organizations, is also in a personal level. So it's great to have that in our minds. Rachel, I know you'll be working with some organizations in these topics. And although we have this perspective from this research, I would like to know your opinion about what are the most significant vulnerabilities that civil society organizations face concerning digital security, according to your experience and what you have been working on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Carlos. I mean, I can really only speak to that from the perspective of someone who works within a foundation, a funding organization. And at the Hilton Foundation, we have made a whole of organization commitment to what we are calling locally led development, supporting local community-based organizations, right? Local civil society. And so Kwame statistics about 1/3 of civil society organizations facing a security threat, but only 12% having a budget line item to address that very security threat is concerning to me as a donor. We want to understand where these risk factors are because they also impact our work, and we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of our resources. But we don't want to be put into the position where we have to use these risk factors to determine where our funding goes, right? I don't want lack of training for a civil society organization who's doing really incredible work in the field to determine whether or not I can continue to support that organization. So one solution that we've come up with Makaya and TechSoup, good company on this call, is to provide capacity building resources through our partners to local organizations. I think we're funding 30 at the moment across 3 different regions where they can get at some of these questions that our other panelists have raised. It's not just the hardware and the software that needs to be upgraded, but also a cultural shift and the understanding of how to think about security and security threats. So that's a little bit of what we're doing at the moment.
Thank you, Rachel, for sharing that. And I really appreciate the vision you have about this issue and how a founder works with the organizations is working on a daily basis. I mean, the results of that organization, the threats of that organizations is also the threats and the results or a bigger chain. And in this case, it involves the founders. So it's great to know that perspective. Okay, in order to continue with the conversation, Marnie, I would like to know your opinion about what specific actions or recommendations will you make to civil society organizations to improve their digital security? What can we advise about this to our audience at this moment?
Yeah, one of the things that's the most difficult with digital security for organizations is often the most pragmatic. That is, organizations engage in cost-cutting behaviors to lower the cost of the tools they have in ways that leave them insecure. They share username and passwords. They don't separate their systems. They don't separate administrative roles. And I think one of the most pragmatic things organizations can do is a review of who has access to which tools and what kind of data, with the goal of standardizing who can access what, so that they can even get in a place where they can manage their security at an enterprise level, right? And that's thinking about who's the administrator of the tools and the permissions associated with roles. I think it very much aligns with the idea of creating a digital security plan and creating a baseline that is about access to information inside the organization and sort of growing from there. Secondarily, I think providing training both inside their organization and where possible to their community members, with an emphasis on security, but also with an emphasis on sort of the digital fluency that ensures that they aren't spreading harmful information, that they don't become a vector of attack for bad actors because of the information that they're sharing in good faith, right? So making sure that they are able to do that. And then finally engaging in the digital equity conversation that Chris was talking about, thinking of themselves as advocates for the policies necessary for them and the people that they serve to be able to act safely on the internet with reliable tools.
Okay, thank you, Marnie. Completely agree. And yeah, I think that the first point for starting this is an assessment about which are the risks an organization could face, and building that plan you mentioned, the digital security plan, which also can involve creating the culture and providing the training for the people so they can interact well with technology and avoid this being affected by this risk. Chris, I would like to go with you in the terms of what is the role of civil society organizations in promoting and empowering their communities for a digital equity.
Thanks. And to my co-panelists and audience, my apologies. I'm going to have to go off camera in a moment. I'm having a childcare challenge. Those of you who have children know what those are like. The good news is you can get a last look. Yeah. I look like a bald white guy. And if you'd like to find me on LinkedIn, please do. I'm always happy to carry on this conversation. But to answer the question, what can civil society do? I think the main thing that we have talked about with civil society, again, through some of the research that I spoke to earlier, was exactly what Marnie just said. Work with civil society should not think about sort of digitalization, digital rights, digital futures as something that just happen without our control. We are citizens, we are advocates, we are consumers, we know what we need. We know what our communities need. We in civil society know better than most what many communities need. And it is incumbent upon us to stand up for these communities, to stand up for our digital rights, because they are rights. And that is a point that we have tried to make quite loudly, that access to the internet is a right. Any government that has committed to the SDGs, SDG 9C, talks about universal access by 2030. We've got a long way to go, but we have made commitments to getting people online, to a positive digitalization in the world. And civil society, we're the ones that kind of make sure these things happen. We're the ones who stand up for rights, fight for rights, ensure rights, and speak out when rights are not being met. We need the internet. Our communities need the internet. We need digital equity because digitalization is happening, whether we like it or not. It is accelerating with things like AI. Governments are increasingly invested in digitalization of their services, which is very painful sometimes when people can't access those services. So this is a space where, again, we must think about ourselves as part of the equation, think about it in terms of rights and rights struggles that must be won for communities, and look at the kinds of models that are out there. Look at what others have done. Makaya has done some brilliant work in this space over the years. There are a lot of people in civil society who are the sort of front line in advocating for access for rights, for the kinds of policies that work, whether or not it is within our organization's immediate mission to be a part of digitalization. I think we all know that we rely on the internet, and therefore we should at least familiarize ourselves with the conversation and look for the people that are leading the fight so that we can stand with them. So that when there is an issue that needs to be fought for, we know who to look to, we know who to partner with, and bring the weight of all civil society behind the few people who are really doing that frontline advocacy work. We don't all need to do that work, but we do need to understand it, and we do need to be able to stand with people when the time comes. So again, my apologies. I'm still here. I'm just going to be invisible.
Thank you, Chris. We will have that sense that someone is talking us from the other world, but yeah, we will appreciate your comments. And thank you for this vision, Chris. I think it's great to think about this as a right, and we as civil society organizations have the opportunity, but also the responsibility to be a bridge, uh, so our beneficiaries can take advantage of, can receive the benefits that technology has there for everyone in the world. So we can be that bridge, and that's our call for the social sector. And fortunately, I don't know other sector that can work with the amount of people, or that can touch the amount of people that the social sector touch on a daily basis regarding the actions we have in the different countries and territories. So that's great that we have that job, and that's something that we need to prepare for. Rachel, just wanted to talk one for you to share us, continue with this concept about digital equity. What do you think? How can organizations and funders work together to implement improvement in digital equity inside the organizations?
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. Absolutely. First, I just want to say, Marnie, I think I need a digital security plan for my household. Thank you for reading that. There's some personal tips here. Um, and that's kind of to my point. The first thing I would say is just to have the conversations, because I don't think, for those of us who don't, I am not a digital security expert, right? I work at a foundation. I don't think about these issues on a day-to-day basis necessarily. And I don't think that they come up in conversations with my grantee partners. And I know that that can be a little bit intimidating, but that would be my first kind of call to action and piece of advice, is to have these conversations, have them with donors, draw attention to the fact that if you're operating on project-based grants, you don't necessarily have the resources to invest in the digital security infrastructure that you need. And I think it's okay to say, as we mentioned earlier, that impacts not just your organization, but your community and your donors, quite frankly. I think that's how the Hilton Foundation got involved in this space, is we had an initial issue with a wire transfer. But instead of saying, oh, it's too risky, and changing our funding practices, we said, okay, this is clearly an issue in this space. How can we use our resources to improve this situation for everyone? So that's kind of my first call, is to have the conversation, draw attention to the issue. As Chris said, be an advocate. And then if there are any donors or funders on the call, I think there's a real need for our sector to be more creative and thoughtful in this space. I know of very few foundations who have a mission or a strategy around digital equity, but we all are trying to support civil society. And I think that there's ways that you can work this into your grant making, including just line items in individual budgets, right? Can there be an overhead line item for digital security training? I know if a grantee partner asked me about that, I would be thrilled to include it. So that'd be my offering, Carlos.
Thank you, Rachel. And I really love the concept you bring to the table. And it is how, I mean, of course, having this conversation, but the call to action you made to founders and donors is really aligned with that concept that civil society organizations are working on a daily basis for our communities, but we also need to build our own capabilities so we can gain the long-term sustainability we need, so we can continue creating the benefits and the good we are creating in our communities. And that, I mean, creating those capabilities is something that sometimes civil society organizations cannot do alone, and they could need like a conversation with the donors that are supporting that are supporting that job. And also I think that concept is completely aligned with the localization strategy that we are facing in the international cooperation strategy around the world. I mean, if we want a long-term sustainability around the benefits that in the programs we are developing in the different countries, that happens because of the organizations that are working on a daily basis in the territory. So definitely, if we want to achieve that, if we want to achieve the SDGs by 2030 and not leaving someone behind, strengthening the capabilities of civil society organizations, it's something we need to work on, and something good from that perspective. So thank you, Rachel. Really aligned with what you say. Marnie, I know you mentioned some of this in your previous comment, but perhaps thinking about best practices, and you mentioned some of best practices, but thinking about focus on best practices that civil society organizations can follow. Which practices will you recommend?
I really do think thinking about how people that are using your systems are accessing and using it. And following best practices that each user has an individual log on to systems so that you can help control and lock down. And it's not because you don't trust the users, it's so that you can isolate security threats, right? And so that when people leave an organization or they cease volunteering with you, you're confident that you've taken them off of your system so that you're not accidentally leaving any holes open. But I think that part of user management and taking multi-factor authentication very seriously, and training. So really concentrating on making sure individuals like me using TechSoup systems, that I'm logging on securely. We know what systems I have access to, and I've gone through some prescribed training so that I can be aware of security issues. But most vectors of attack are increasingly through the users. Especially for small organizations. So I think one of the most pragmatic things an organization can do is focus on securing the user through training and through appropriate use of roles and access.
Thank you, Marnie. And you remind me the multi-factor that perhaps the majority of us do not like too much because every time we're going to try to access to our email, we need to follow another step, but completely needed for securing the information we have and for securing the data, our methodologies, and all the stuff we have as civil society organizations. So if Chris can hear us, and talking about following with this concept that Marnie just mentioned, for you, Chris, which are the skills or infrastructure that civil society organizations need in today's digital society so they can achieve digital security?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think I don't have too much to add to what Marnie said from sort of a tactical perspective, though I would share, Marnie and Carlos, a couple of times somebody said sort of in small organizations. I was at a conference recently where someone from a very large government development aid corporation sat down next to me and went through at least 4 multi-factor authentications to get into their email, sent an email, stood up and said, "I'm going to go get a coffee. Do you want one?" and walked away with everything logged in. I felt like sending a few emails on their behalf just to have some fun, but that probably would have gotten me in a lot of trouble. So it's everybody. Everybody is sort of in this process of learning the habits that keep people safe. I think one thing that I would say, sort of a skill that I might look to civil society to work on or build a capacity is the capacity to self-advocate in these conversations. Rachel mentioned basically nobody in the funding world is set up to be a funder of digital equity, much less digital security and some of the other issues around digitalization. That's a relationship we need to change with our funders. We need to speak up for ourselves and help our funders understand that this is an issue that is critical to the work that they care about and we care about, that we both care about in our funding relationships. Many funders are quite privileged. They have IT people, they have staff, they have contemporary hardware and software training, whether they do it or not. They certainly have the opportunity. And so many of them simply don't appreciate that this is such a critical issue for civil society. We need to explain that. And it can be tricky. I appreciate that. I've heard from civil society organizations when they're asked the question, why don't you speak up about this? That they're afraid to speak up because they're afraid to show a weakness to a funder. They're afraid to say to a funder or have a funder think about them as digitally insecure. That's very unfortunate. We're all digitally insecure. We need to have the conversation and work through it. So speaking up to funders, helping engage funders in this conversation so that funders understand this is a skill they need to build, I think that is something that is quite critical. And I think the wonderful research that both Micaiah and Waxy have done is fantastic at demonstrating some of the sort of daily impacts of digital security risks upon the operation of civil society. And I think that is a point that could be built on just a little bit to add an analysis of some, essentially a cost-benefit analysis of digital security in action. What does it actually cost us to not make the honestly small investments in proper hardware, proper software, and proper training for civil society compared to the impact of NGOs being offline 2 to 3 to 5 days a month because of digital security problems? Actually analyzing that and quantifying it for people so that we can say, look, we are making a choice here. We are making a choice to say, oh, we don't fund these things because they're overhead. We're making a choice then to say, we are letting our people be less secure. We are letting our people not have the time to deliver on the things that we both agreed to deliver on because they have been hacked. That seems like a conversation and mathematical equation that would be easy to sort of have a very rational conversation about. So I would, again, encourage us on sort of the individual organizational level to work on how we speak to our funders about this, and then on the sort of Micaiah, Waxy, TechSoup, other advocate level to look at some of those data points we might gather that make this math. That it's not a question about if we should do this, but a question about what are the alternatives and risks if we don't.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I have some questions from the audience. So let me just read it and you choose who could answer. One of the questions is, how can the nonprofits get funding for digital security? They say in Africa, but also there's another question around the world. So how can they get funding, and how can get access to training or courses? So I don't know, Marnie, if you would like, or Rachel, who activated the mic.
I can jump in really quick, Carlos, since I am a funder, and I, as Chris said, I fully acknowledge and own that this is an under-resourced issue, and I don't, to be transparent, I don't know that it's going to be easy to shift. But I want to offer two things. One, I want to say that you can also look me up on LinkedIn. There's only one Rachel Hughey. It's easy to find. So I'm always happy to have these conversations and coach you through a conversation with your program officer. I mean, the Hilton Foundation is not going to become the funder of all digital security, unfortunately. And so that solution, I think we're going to have to get more creative about. And the second thing I wanted to offer that is related both to this question and to Chris's comment around, kind of to prep for this call, I actually had a call with Adam Marnie from TechSoup just to make sure I knew what was going on before I spoke to the program. And he said one thing that they discovered, Adam leads the Digital Security Strengthening Initiative with civil society that we're supporting. One thing that they found in these conversations, one of the big barriers to improving digital security is a feeling of shame, actually, that CSOs don't want to share that they don't have these basic protections in place, especially with a donor. And I get it. I mean, no matter how nice I try to be, like that power imbalance is always going to exist. So I think finding good third-party partners who can kind of have those conversations and create safe spaces like TechSoup and Makaya is a really good solution. But if you're coming from a civil society organization, I recognize that it's hard to get this work resourced. And I wish that I had a clearer response for you or one place you could go, but I don't have that right now. But I think it's worth having the conversations. And Marnie, I don't know if you have more to add to that or could.
Yeah, I think on the side of the organizations, the best advice is to try to include it in every grant. You know, and you can either include it like you were suggesting earlier, Rachel, as a line item in a grant, or it can be included as part of your overhead, so that you're being explicit that you have to cover the digital security of the people working on this grant and collecting this data that probably the funder wants you to report back to them, that probably includes personal information about members of your community because you're providing resources for them, right? So I think there are a couple of ways to think about that, but I think it's hard. One of the things that we've been leaning against as a organization that sort of works on building capabilities across the sector is, are there opportunities to create direct support, so that you're sort of creating a little bit of distance between the organization and that shame? And funders are contributing, or organizations and the funder, because of the issue of shame that you were bringing up, but also so that we can say it's a problem for all civil society organizations, not just ones that are like funded by foundations that are willing to look at that as a part of the overhead of the organization. And we have mechanisms to support organizations that may be particularly poorly resourced because of where they are, or because of the size of the organization, or maybe they haven't even formalized as a traditional NGO, and so maybe they're not eligible for those grants. And I think that concept of getting foundations to contribute to that kind of a fund could have value.
Thank you, Rachel. Marnie, one last question from the audience. Someone asked, is the cloud a more secure way to store data, and how can nonprofits migrate to the cloud?
So you can look me up on LinkedIn. I can talk about this with anybody for a while. There's more than one Marnie Webb, but only one that works for TechSoup. So in almost all instances, the answer is likely yes. There are, simply because the companies running different cloud solutions, houses and protections around their systems, and they're regularly patching holes. There are instances where that may not be true for an organization working in specific issue areas that may be facing certain regulations, or where the cloud provision, the cloud storage may be in a country with whom they don't have a friendly relationship. And that gets at some of the policies and regulations and digital equity and safety issues, actually. So most of the time, yes, sometimes no.
Okay, thank you, Marnie. Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Chris, and the audience for attending this event. I would like to invite Laura Adams, who is going to give us some conclusions about this topic, and also she's going to invite us for our next steps. Laura works at CSN STAM Consortium. Laura is currently at PAC as a director for monitoring, evaluation, and learning for a USA-funded Global Civil Society and Media Strengthening Award called CSN STAM.
Thanks, Carlos. Yeah, this event today is part of CSM Stan's global learning agenda. And you can read more about that if you go to the CSM Stand booth in the expo area. You should be open on this really amazing virtual platform. You can exit this hall and go into the expo hall and check out the booths of all the organizations here. But as part of our commitment to learning more about how to promote safety and well-being for civil society and media organizations around the world, we want to invite you to continue the conversation we've had today. In a few months, we will hold a solutions workshop where we will ask the participants of that workshop to brainstorm ways that we can address some of the challenges that were laid out by the research you heard today. So if you are in the tech sector or a researcher on organizational and behavioral change, if you are a funder of civil society and media organizations, if you are from an organization that has successfully gone through a digital transformation to address your own security risks, or in general, if you are somebody who wants to support a movement for greater digital equity, we invite you to use a QR code. I think there's going to be a QR code that shows up that will allow you to pre-register for the workshop, which we will co-create with you. Over the next few months, we will get in touch with you to design the solutions workshop based on your ideas for what we can tackle in that workshop. And then we will invite organizations that participate in that workshop to join with us. To design and fund a pilot project and to rigorously test one or more solutions or approaches that come out of that workshop so that we can continue to contribute to the global learning that Micaiah and Waxy and TechSoup have shared with you today. So please use this QR code to let us know if you're interested in that follow-up conversation. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for that invitation, and thank you for this conclusion. Thank you to all the audience who participated in this event. I would like, please, to recommend you to fill in the satisfaction survey that is in the chat, and also in the bottom of the screen. So, in the bottom of your screens, can you please, in a word, summarize what do you take from this event? And just to remind you that the stands available in the platform will be available through the whole day. So you can visit the stands and share and see some of the information available during the whole day. And you can actually invite some colleagues who would like to see what is happening around this event. So thank you, everyone, again, and have a nice day. And please remember to fill in the survey, the satisfaction survey, and also tell us in one word, what do you take from this event?